I am here in Amsterdam, waiting to board my flight to Brazil via Lisbon. So this will be the first of my COP30 video diaries. My intention is to record one every day until the end of the COP. This is my third COP. I went to Paris in 2015 and to Glasgow in 2021. This COP feels as if it could be the most significant yet, possibly even more significant than Paris. My reading of the situation is we are at a definite critical tipping point in terms of what's happening with the Earth system itself, the climate system, and correspondingly, we're at a tipping point in terms of the politics and economics, um, of the situation in terms of the predicament of humanity and how humanity is responding to that predicament. It's a very precarious, dangerous situation, but I am not going to be speaking in a way that adds to the doom scenario. Hmm. I think as climate activists, we need to navigate a very um, balanced middle path between continuing to emphasize the very great danger that we are in, that our civilization and indeed uh, uh, our current ecosystem. I'll say more about what I mean by that during these talks because I think it's very important to identify what it is that actually is threatened specifically. Some people talk about near-term human extinction. This, I think, is unrealistic. Um, but what is at stake is colossal. It is beyond the power of our imagination, really, to fully grasp what could happen if the worst case scenario unfolds. But as I said, although I will be drawing attention to some of those very scary aspects of the situation, that is not what I want to emphasize because it has been spoken about enough. And if the emphasis is too much on that side, it can be extremely counterproductive. What, in my view, is very important to talk about now is the other side of the picture. There is a great deal on the other side of that balance pan that is not very clear to many people. Um, the general public is more aware, I think, of the level of danger than might appear from what we see looking through the lens of the news media and so forth. But the positive things that are happening that have the potential to turn the situation around are less visible through that lens. Um, and I think it's of the first importance that, first of all, climate activists themselves focus more single-mindedly on those positive potentials because those are the things we need to be giving our energy and attention to try to make them happen. So the more we focus on those positive possibilities, the more we amplify them and the more we communicate them to people outside the sort of core climate movement, perhaps, or the places within the climate movement where those positive possibilities are being developed and worked on, then the more people that recognize it, the more people that experience a sense of possibility and hope, and therefore are motivated to action. So that's what I'm quite focused on. In my talk for the Schumacher Institute, I recognized that I focused on that sort of optimistic side, maybe a bit too exclusively, because some people in the audience thought that I was peddling hopium. Um, I That is not how I see things. The danger is extreme, and the danger has been increasing, um, and it's increased dramatically over the past 20 years. 20 years ago, we were already in a dangerous situation, but it has got more dangerous. So the things that need to be happening to change the direction, to change the trajectory towards um, a livable world, shall we say, to put it in a nutshell, um, they have scaled up and much more, probably than most people, the general public, realize. Um, but the danger has also come much closer. So we are on a real knife edge right now. I feel this year, next year, this is a really, really critical turning point. And I say that fully recognizing that similar things have been said many times before. Um, and the fact that I'm saying it again, I don't think negates that. And the fact that I might say it again in 2 years' time, it'll be a different situation. It'll be a different kind of turning point. And probably we will again be at a critical turning point. But right now, and in these diaries, I want to be speaking about what this tipping point looks like now, why I believe that there is the potential for a positive tipping point that will change the picture, make things look much more hopeful. And what, on my understanding, needs to happen for that to come about, how the Brazil COP is such an important focal point for that turnaround, the possibility of that turnaround to be actualized. So it can be optimistic or pessimistic about it. But the thing is, if we want it to happen, we need to put our energies into it, and we need to put them into it coming from a belief that it can happen and that those actions that we do will bring it about. If we are serious and committed and we're doing the right things, coming from the right motivation, then we have to hope that that will spread, that other people will recognize it, that people, organizations, institutions, governments, financial actors, um, everybody starts to come together around a common understanding of what we need to do to preserve a livable planet for ourselves, for future generations. So that's why I'm going to the COP, because I I have been inspired, excited by what I think is the very positive orientation of the organizing team, the Brazilian presidency of the COP, um, under the leadership of President Lula and the team that he has assembled. So I want to understand that more deeply. I want to understand what is the meaning of the call for a global mutirão, this indigenous Tupi-Guarani word that has been um, sort of mm, reframed into the Portuguese language, which means something like what happens after, let's say, a village has been flooded, all the inhabitants of the village come together to rebuild the village because they recognize that is what needs to be done. So this is a part of the Brazilian culture, and especially the indigenous Brazilian culture, but I think also Brazilian culture generally. It's been influenced by the indigenous people there. There is this sense of, the community as a whole coming together around a common purpose. And that is what the COP30 presidency is calling on the world to do. We need a global mutirão. We need the whole world to come together to address the critical threat to the survival of our civilization, not to the survival of our species as such, because I am convinced that, however appallingly catastrophic the impacts of climate change may be, complete extinction of the human species is a very unlikely outcome. It could happen for other reasons, but not just because of climate change. But, if 90% of the human population was wiped out, in biological terms, this wouldn't even resemble an extinction. There'd still be 800 million people in the world, much more than enough to continue the human species. But the scale of that disaster is something that we cannot even comprehend. I mean, it would be, many orders of magnitude worse than anything that's ever happened in the whole of human history. So by saying I don't think we're going to become extinct, I am not being a Pollyanna. That catastrophe, the decimation of the human population to that extent, which some experts think is highly possible, that must be avoided at all costs. Even losing 10% of the population would be a disaster beyond imagination. That is a very likely outcome. So I'm not peddling hopium, but we absolutely must do everything that we can to minimize the impact. We're no longer talking about preventing climate change from happening. It's happening already, and it's happening on a major scale. We are already, in my opinion, probably past the 1.5-degree limit that was agreed for very good reasons at the Paris Climate Summit. That number was not arbitrary. And at the time, and until very recently, it was not expected that we would pass that limit this soon. So that's how dangerous the situation is, because although 1.5 degrees centigrade might not sound very much, when we look at what starts to happen as we go beyond that, we see that, the difference between 1.5 degrees and 2 degrees in terms of the scale of the impacts is colossal. And we are already seeing very serious impacts. So this is an urgent, critical situation. It is a global emergency. And it is not being treated as such by governments or by many large financial institutions and corporations that are contributing to the problem. But things are changing. Investment is moving very rapidly towards renewable energy and many forms of positive, productive activity that was going to help with the climate situation. This is happening very fast. But it needs to happen faster. And the most authoritative analysis, which I would say is coming from the community around the global tipping points work at the Global Systems Institute and Exeter University and the Potsdam Institute, the analysis suggests very clearly this number that we need to accelerate action on climate by a factor of 5. We need to go 5 times faster. And that is really urgent. That needs to happen over the next 5 years. I don't mean waiting 5 years and then speeding up to 5 times faster. To embed that acceleration will take some time. But the action needs to start right now. And this COP is the moment where we are being called as a global human community to make that happen. And the fact that what used to be the most powerful nation in the world is currently exerting all its efforts to stop that I don't think makes it impossible. The United States is not all powerful, and it may well be rapidly becoming less powerful because of the unwise actions that it's taking now, which are going to be damaging to its own economy and giving the global advantage to China, which is now one of the leaders on many aspects of positive climate action. So I think we are seeing a political realignment, a global political realignment, which could be very positive for the climate situation. I'm not sure that those people who are determined to prevent the transition away from fossil fuels to renewable energy and so on, and to persuade people that climate change isn't real, or that we don't need to do anything. I don't think they have all the cards. And we need to believe that they haven't got all the cards. So, whilst, and I'll be talking a lot about this, as climate activists, we need to be very careful about getting into conversations and narratives that are very adversarial. It's very easy to fall into that and blaming certain people or certain groups or certain ideologies. We are all in this together as the human community, together with our non-human friends, comrades, and cousins, who we need to think more about. So, my 15 minutes for today are up, and I will be back tomorrow with more thoughts on the way to the COP. So tomorrow I will be in Lisbon, and then the next day I will be in Fortaleza in Brazil, and then the next day I will be in Belem. So I'll be following through these thoughts and reporting on what I'm finding and what I want to do at the COP and when I come back from the COP. Thank you for listening. More tomorrow.